Okay, so next up, now that we have our power distribution board and our flight controller mounted, we're going to want to go ahead and solder up give our flight controller some power. So we're going to solder the ground, and it needs 5 volts. So it's those 2 pads right there, and that's going to be the black wire and the red wire. And it looks like we have plenty of wire here. So I'm going to twist it up a little bit and probably snip it. Twisting it up gives you the flexibility of having a little bit of extra if you need a little bit of extra for some reason in the future, and it makes it so they're wiggling around a little bit less. But still, even with winding it up, we have about that much extra that I don't ever see us need. So we're going to go ahead and snip the little bit of extra and throw out those tiny little pieces. So let's go ahead and separate. This out, and I actually have to strip them. Okay. And so I'm first going to pre-tin the pads. So I'm just going to touch the soldering iron to the pad and then add some solder. Oh, that didn't work. Okay. There we go. And I want to pre-tin each of these little wires here. So heat up the wire, touch the solder to the wire. Lots of solder. Clean off the tip a little bit. Okay. So now we want the black ground to go on ground, which is that right one out of the 4. Not the straightest soldering. I'm going to go ahead and push it over. Probably doesn't matter that it's not centered on the pad, but it'll look better if it's centered on the pad. And now I'm going to solder. Yeah, I'm just using this knife to hold it closer to where I want it. Should probably go get my tweezers to do this, but now I'm just going to touch them together and they're going to connect. Ooh, that was not good. I have that touching the ground. So let's go ahead and make sure we're pushing this over here. So yeah, desoldered that, and now I'm going to make sure that I'm going to push it down and make sure it stays more straight right there on that 5 volt pad. Because that's the last thing that we want, is current flowing from one to the other. So there we go. We have our 5 volt and our ground for our flight controller. So while we're at it, let's go ahead and just pre-tin all of our pads, because I think we're going to end up using all of them. So just get some solder on each of those. Lots of solder. So I'm doing all the positive first because they connect, so the heat is actually going to be distributed. So once you heat up one, they kind of all heat up. So it should be fairly easy. Here, I'm going to go ahead and put more solder on some of these. Lots of solder always makes things easy. Okay, and let's go ahead and do the negatives. Negative. 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 And so really all these positives and negatives are connected together, so it doesn't matter which ones you're soldering to, except for the 5 volt. The 5 volt is the only one, and this 12 volt, that's going to be different. Other than that, all those positives are going to be connected together, and all the negatives are going to be connected together. Obviously the positive and the negatives are not connected, otherwise you would get a short and a fire. Yeah, that's always the nerve-wracking thing about these builds, is putting them all together, and then when you go to plug it in, hoping it doesn't catch on fire. Okay, and then you gotta buy a new part. So we can go ahead and we're gonna solder right there for that ESC. There we go. So positive, negative for this one. And this one, positive, negative. So it doesn't look like we're going to have to cross over any wires. And this one, positive, negative. Okay, and so let's go ahead and start snipping. So we want these all to be a little bit shorter than the signal wires, but about the same. So these signal wires for this one, this black and white, small wires in there, we cut a little bit short. So this will be just about the same length as those to get to the respective pads. So let's go ahead and snip this. And then this black one needs to go a little bit farther. Go ahead and snip this a little bit longer. And I'm not going to twist up this ESC since we did cut this signal wire a little bit shorter. And that wire's we can probably snip off just a little bit more from this one, just a tad. And so that looks like about the length we're going to want. So let's go ahead and strip. Strip the power wire. There we go. And let's go ahead and pre-tin. So we get solder right there on the end. So when we stick it on the power distribution board, the two solders should just flow together very nicely. So here we go, right there. Stick it right here on the end, and careful not to burn yourself. And that flowed on nicely. And same with this black wire. Just flow into the material there. Okay, so that's motor 1 ESC. And so now, let's go to motor 2. Now this one, you see we have a lot more slack there on that, which is good. So we can go ahead and twist this one up a little bit. So I'm twisting up the little black and white wire while keeping the red and the big red and black wire kind of out of the picture. There we go. So now it'll tuck away a little bit easier. And we can give still a little bit of slack here. So right about here is where we're going to want to snip them off. So the black wire is probably a little bit longer, but should be okay. So same thing. Let's go ahead and strip the black and red wire. Okay. And pre-tin. Okay, now let's go ahead and get that negative on there. We kind of want the wire pointed the direction that we want the wire to go. Oops, didn't hold steady. It just flows together. Blow to cool it off so it hot hardens just a little bit faster. Okay. And now this red one. There we go. And so you can see that black wire is probably a little bit longer, red's a little bit short, but doesn't need to be exact. As long as it's not too short, we'll be okay. Okay, so we have motor 1, 2, on to motor 3. Again, we have a lot of slack. So let's go ahead and twist this up. I might be twisting the opposite way as I did with the other one. There we go. Now that signal wire won't be flopping around. Yeah, but I probably twisted a little bit more than I wanted to. Just cannot make up my mind. Okay, perfect. Okay, so hold the ESC there. Lay out the wires. And so that's where we're going to cut them. This one we're going to end up with the opposite problem. Should probably cut them separately so I see that better. So go ahead and strip this wire. There we go. And pre-tin. And pre-tin. Okay. We'll go ahead and do the negative first. So now it's time to solder on this, the red to the plus. There we go. And also while you're doing the lengths of these, it's good to have just a little bit of extra slack because we're going to have these long standoffs here. Oh, but I might, hopefully I don't need to file that away a little bit. So, and we need to access where the screws go. Okay, so now we have 1, 2, 3, on to number 4. Last and final one. So twist. There we go. Not too many twists. This one I feel like is the longest though. Okay. And so I'll go ahead and cut them separately just to there we go. And I'm just looking at this pile of little cut-off pieces that I have. And even though I measured each one, they all came about the same length that I cut off. Like just under a board length. That one was a little bit shorter. So essentially I cut off just under a board length for each of those. Same with these black ones. the shortest black one was still longer than between the two standoffs, or just exactly the length from the two holes on the board. So let's go ahead and strip and solder. There we go. Well, first pre-tin, then solder. Strip, pre-tin, solder. Okay, let's get this red one to the plus. Those together. And this black one to the negative. And this is where I got to be careful not to melt those little screws on. And so there we have it.